Eleanor Grayson sat at her kitchen table, the morning light filtering through lace curtains she'd hung decades ago. At 70, her hands were steady but bore the faint tremble of time, and her silver hair was pulled into a neat bun. The house smelled of fresh coffee and the faint lavender of her favorite candle, a ritual she'd kept since her husband, Tom, passed 10 years ago. She sipped her coffee, the mug warm against her palms, and stared at the empty chair across from her. It used to be Tom's. Now, it was just a reminder of absence until recently. Her son, Michael, had moved back in 6 months ago. At 35, he was a man adrift, his tech startup dreams crushed by a failed venture and a divorce that left him broke and bitter. Eleanor had welcomed him, her only child, with open arms. She'd cooked his favorite meals, listened to his rants about the world's unfairness, and ignored the way he left dishes in the sink or his gym bag in the hallway. She told herself it was temporary. He'd find his footing. He was her son. But last night's conversation had shifted something in her. It started innocently enough. Michael slouched on the couch, scrolling his phone, while Eleanor mentioned her plans for the evening. She joined a local book club a few months back, a small rebellion against the loneliness that had crept into her days. The club had introduced her to George, a retired history professor with kind eyes and a laugh that made her feel 20 again. They'd started meeting for coffee, then dinner, and now, at George's gentle urging, they were planning a weekend trip to the coast. "You're going where?" Michael had looked up, his brow furrowed, his tone sharp enough to cut. "With that guy? Mom, you're 70. Dating at your age is embarrassing. People will talk. You're making a fool of yourself." The words landed like a slap. Eleanor had frozen, her smile fading as she stood in the living room, clutching the edge of the sideboard. She'd spent years rebuilding herself after Tom's death, learning to navigate a world that often ignored women her age, finding joy in small acts of courage like joining the book club or buying a new dress. And now, her own son, the boy she'd raised through scraped knees and broken hearts, was calling her joy embarrassing. She didn't respond that night. She'd gone to bed, the sting of his words keeping her awake, replaying the moment over and over. By morning, as she sat at the kitchen table, something new stirred in Hera. Quiet, burning resolve. She wasn't the frail widow Michael seemed to see. She was Eleanor Grayson, a woman who'd survived loss, raised a son alone, and paid off a mortgage with a teacher's salary. She wasn't done living, and she certainly wasn't going to let her son's judgment shrink her world. The front door creaked open, and Michael shuffled in, his hair mussed, his hoodie wrinkled. "Morning," he muttered, heading for the coffee pot without meeting her eyes. Eleanor set her mug down with a deliberate clink. "Michael, we need to talk." He sighed, pouring coffee. "About what?" "Last night. I didn't mean it like that. Okay. I just think you should be careful. People take advantage of older women." Her jaw tightened. "Careful? I've been careful my whole life. I was careful when I raised you, when I buried your father, when I kept this house running. I don't need a lecture on caution from you." Michael turned, surprised by her tone. "Mom, I'm just looking out for you." "No, you're not." Her voice was steady, but her eyes blazed. "You're ashamed of me. You think I'm too old to want love, to want a life. You think I should just sit here and fade away so you can feel comfortable." He opened his mouth, then closed it, his face a mix of guilt and defiance. "That's not what I meant." "Then what did you mean?" She pressed, standing now, her small frame radiating a strength she hadn't felt in years. "Because I'm not your maid, Michael. I'm not your cook or your landlord. This is my home, and I'm not going to let you disrespect me in it." The air grew heavy. Michael shifted, his fingers tightening around his mug. I'm not disrespecting you. I just think you're moving too fast with this guy. You don't even know him. I know he makes me laugh, Eleanor said softly. I know he listens when I talk, sees me as a person, not just a mother or a widow. And I know I deserve that. Michael, I deserve it at 70, just as much as you did at 30. He looked away, his jaw working. Eleanor waited, hoping for an apology, a flicker of understanding. But Michael just shook his head and muttered, Whatever. Mom, do what you want. That was the moment she decided. She wasn't going to argue, plead, or shrink herself to fit his expectations. If Michael couldn't respect her choices, he didn't belong in her home. She'd spent too many years sacrificing for him to let him dictate her happiness now. That afternoon, Eleanor drove to the local library, where her friend Margaret worked as a clerk. Margaret, a sharp-witted woman in her 60s, had a knack for cutting through nonsense. Over tea in the library's break room, Eleanor recounted the fight. He said what? Margaret's eyes widened, her teacup pausing midair. Embarrassing. Oh, honey, you should have thrown his sneakers out the window right then. Eleanor laughed, but it was hollow. I don't know what to do. Margaret, he's my son. I love him. But I can't live like this, feeling judged in my own house. Margaret leaned forward, her voice firm. You've given that boy everything. It's time he learns you're not just his mother, you're a woman with a life of your own. If he can't handle that, maybe he needs a wake-up call. Eleanor nodded, her mind racing. A wake-up call. The idea took root, sharp and daring. By the time she left the library, she knew what she had to do. It wasn't about revenge, it was about reclaiming her space, her dignity, her life. Eleanor spent the next few days in a quiet frenzy of purpose. She wasn't impulsive by nature. Decades of teaching high school English had taught her to plan, to weigh consequences, to anticipate outcomes. But this was different. This wasn't about grading papers or soothing a teenager's tantrum. This was about drawing a line in the sand, about teaching her son a lesson he'd never forget. She started by tidying the house, not because it needed it, but because the act grounded her. She vacuumed under the furniture, polished the oak dining table, and rearranged the framed photos on the mantel, pictures of Michael as a boy, grinning with missing teeth. And later, at his college graduation, his arm around her. Each image stirred a pang of love, but also a reminder of how far they drifted. Michael wasn't that boy anymore, and she wasn't just his mother. She was done letting him define her. By Wednesday, she'd made an appointment with a lawyer. Mr. Caldwell, a soft-spoken man with a cluttered office downtown, listened as she explained her situation. I don't want to hurt him, she said, her hands folded tightly in her lap. But he needs to understand that this is my home, and I won't be disrespected in it. Caldwell nodded, jotting notes. You're well within your rights, Mrs. Grayson. He's not a tenant with a lease, just a family member living in your home. You can ask him to leave at any time. An eviction notice, while not legally required in this case, could make your intentions clear. Eleanor hesitated. The word eviction felt harsh, like something you'd do to a stranger, not your own flesh and blood. But then she remembered Michael's dismissive tone, the way he'd called her choices embarrassing. She squared her shoulders. Let's do it. Caldwell prepared the paperwork, a simple document stating that Michael had 30 days to vacate. Eleanor read it over, her heart pounding. It wasn't just about kicking him out, it was about forcing him to see her. Really see her. As a person with boundaries. Not just a mother who existed to serve him. When she got home, Michael was sprawled on the couch, watching a basketball game. The sight of him, so comfortable in her space while judging her life. Steeled her resolve. She didn't hand him the papers yet. She wanted to talk to George first. That evening, she met George at their favorite cafe. A cozy spot with mismatched chairs and the scent of fresh-baked scones. George, 72, with a shock of white hair and a tweed jacket, smiled as she approached. His warmth was a balm to the tension she'd carried all week. "You look like you've got the weight of the world on you," he said, his voice gentle but probing. Eleanor sighed, stirring her tea. "It's Michael. He thinks I'm too old to be, well, to be with you. He said it's embarrassing." George's face darkened, but his tone stayed calm. "And what do you think?" "I think I'm happier than I've been in years," she said, meeting his eyes. "I think I deserve to feel alive. And you make me feel that way. But Michael's my son. I don't want to lose him." George reached across the table, his hand covering hers. "You're not losing him by standing up for yourself. Sometimes, love means setting boundaries, even with the people closest to you." His words settled over her like a warm blanket. She told him about the eviction notice, expecting him to be shocked. But he just nodded. "Good for you, Eleanor. You're not just teaching him a lesson, you're teaching him who you are." That night, she lay awake, the eviction papers tucked in her desk drawer. She imagined Michael's reaction: anger, maybe, or disbelief. She didn't want to hurt him, but she needed him to understand. She'd spent her life putting him first, sacrificing her own dreams to give him a stable home. Now, it was her turn to live. The next morning, she called Margaret for moral support. "Am I crazy?" she asked, pacing her kitchen. "Evicting my own son?" "Not crazy," Margaret said firmly. "You're showing him that respect goes both ways. He's a grown man, Eleanor. He can't hide in your house forever, judging you while you pay his bills." Eleanor nodded, her resolve hardening. She spent the day cleaning out the guest room where Michael slept, boxing up his old comic books and college sweatshirts. It wasn't about erasing him. It was about making space for herself. By evening, she was ready. She found Michael in the living room, his laptop open, job applications scattered across the coffee table. For a moment, she saw Finette was trying, at least. But then she remembered his words, the way they'd cut her. She took a deep breath and pulled the eviction notice from her cardigan pocket. "Michael," she said, her voice steady. "We need to talk." Michael looked up from his laptop, his expression wary. "What now, Mom?" His tone carried that familiar edge, the one that said he was already bracing for a lecture. Eleanor stood in the doorway, the eviction notice in her hand. Her heart raced, but her voice was calm. "This," she said, holding out the paper. "Read it." He frowned, taking the document. His eyes scanned the page, and she watched his face shift: confusion, then disbelief, then a flash of anger. "An eviction notice? Are you serious?" "Very," she said, crossing her arms. "You have 30 days to find somewhere else to live." Michael stood, the paper crumpling slightly in his grip. "You're kicking me out because I said something you didn't like. That's insane, Mom." "No, it's not." Her voice was firm, but inside, she felt a tremor of doubt. She pushed it down. "You don't get to live in my home, eat my food, and tell me how to live my life. You called my happiness embarrassing. You don't respect me, Michael, and I won't tolerate that." He laughed, a harsh, bitter sound. "Respect? I'm trying to protect you. You're running around with some guy you barely know, acting like a teenager. People will laugh at you." Eleanor's chest tightened, but she didn't flinch. The only person laughing is you. And it's not out of kindness. I'm 70. Not dead. I have every right to love, to travel, to live. And if you can't accept that, you don't belong here. Michael stared at her, his jaw tight. For a moment, she thought he might apologize, but he just shook his head. Fine. If you want me gone, I'll go. But don't expect me to come running back when this guy breaks your heart. He stormed upstairs, the slam of his bedroom door echoing through the house. Eleanor sank onto the couch, her hands trembling. She'd done it. She'd stood her ground. But the victory felt hollow, shadowed by the ache of hurting her son. The next few days were tense. Michael barely spoke to her, moving through the house like a ghost. He'd leave early, return late, and avoid her eyes. Eleanor tried to stay busy gardening, reading, meeting George for lunch, but the silence in her home was deafening. She wondered if she'd gone too far. Was she punishing him for being honest? Was she being selfish? She confided in Margaret over lunch at a diner, the clatter of plates and hum of conversation grounding her. I feel like I'm losing him, she admitted, poking at her salad. What if he hates me for this? Margaret snorted. He doesn't hate you. He's embarrassed himself, and he's lashing out. You're doing the right thing, Eleanor. He needs to grow up, and you need to live your life. George was equally supportive when they met for their usual coffee date. You're not just his mother, he reminded her, his hand warm around hers. You're Eleanor. You've got fire in you, and it's beautiful. Don't let him dim that. Their words buoyed her, but the doubt lingered. She started noticing small things: Michael's job applications left on the table, a half-written email to a recruiter. He was trying, she realized, but he was also stuck, trapped in his own failures and too proud to admit it. She wanted to help him, but not at the cost of her own dignity. One evening, she found him in the kitchen, eating cereal straight from the box. The eviction notice sat on the counter, untouched since their fight. She took a deep breath. Michael, I don't want you to hate me, but I need you to understand why I did this. He didn't look up, but his hand paused mid-bite. You're choosing some guy over your own son. No, she said sharply. I'm choosing myself. For the first time in years. I'm choosing what makes me happy. You're not a child anymore. You don't get to dictate my life because you're scared or embarrassed. He set the box down, his eyes meeting hers for the first time in days. I'm not scared. I don't want you to get hurt. Dad's gone, and I'm supposed to look out for you. Her heart softened, but she held firm. I don't need you to protect me from living. Michael, I need you to respect me. And if you can't stay here. He didn't respond, but the silence felt different, not angry, but heavy with thought. Eleanor left him there, hoping her words had reached him, even just a little. The days crept by, each one marked by the quiet tension between Eleanor and Michael. She kept busy, tending her garden, meeting with her book club, and spending time with George, whose steady presence was a lifeline. But at home, the air felt thick with unspoken words. Michael was still there, his belongings scattered, his job search plodding along. The eviction notice sat on the kitchen counter, a silent ultimatum neither of them mentioned. One afternoon, Eleanor returned from the grocery store to find Michael at the kitchen table, his laptop open but his gaze distant. A stack of resumes lay beside him, some crumpled, others annotated in red pen. For the first time, she saw not just her son, but a man grappling with his own failures. She set her bags down and sat across from him. Any luck? She asked, her tone softer than she'd intended. He shrugged, not meeting her eyes. Got a call back for an interview. Tech support. Nothing fancy, but it's something. That's good. she said, and meant it. You'll get there. Michael. He looked up, his expression guarded. Why do you care? You're kicking me out. Eleanor sighed, folding her hands. I care because you're my son. But caring doesn't mean I let you walk over me. You hurt me. Michael. You made me feel small for wanting to live my life. He shifted, uncomfortable. I didn't mean to. I don't know. It's weird. Okay. Seeing you with someone who's not Dad. It feels like you're moving on. Like he didn't matter. Her breath caught. She hadn't realized how much of Michael's anger stemmed from grief. From the shadow of his father's absence. Your father will always matter, she said quietly. But he's gone. Michael. And I'm still here. I can't stop living because he did. Michael looked down, his fingers tracing the edge of his laptop. I know. I miss him. And I'm messing everything up me marriage. My career. I don't want you to mess up too. Eleanor reached across the table, her hand hovering near his. I'm not messing up. I'm finding happiness. And you can too. But you have to take responsibility for your life. Not hide in mine. He didn't respond, but the hardness in his face softened. Just a fraction. It wasn't an apology, but it was a start. That evening, Eleanor went to her book club, where the group was discussing The Nightingale. The story of resilience and sacrifice stirred something in her. She shared her situation with the group, her voice steady as she recounted Michael's words and her decision. The women ranging from 50 to 80 listened, their faces a mix of empathy and admiration. You're a warrior, Eleanor, said Clara, a spry 82-year-old with a penchant for bold scarves. You're teaching him what strength looks like. When she got home, Michael was gone, but he'd left a note. Interview tomorrow. Won't be home for dinner. It was curt, but it was progress. Eleanor smiled, tucking the note into her pocket. The next week brought a shift. Michael started leaving the house more, returning with a tired but determined look. He landed the tech support job, a modest role with a local company. But it was a step. Eleanor noticed small change. She washed his dishes, folded his laundry, even offered to mow the lawn. She didn't rescind the eviction notice, but she began to hope they could find a way forward. One evening, George invited her to a community dance at the local rec center. Eleanor hesitated. Dancing felt like another bold step, one Michael might judge. But George's warm smile and the memory of her own resolve pushed her to say yes. She wore a flowing blue dress, her silver hair swept up, and when George spun her on the dance floor, she felt a joy so pure it brought tears to her eyes. When she got home, Michael was in the living room, watching TV. He glanced at her, taking in her dress, her flushed cheeks. You look nice, he said, almost grudgingly. Thank you, she replied, her voice light but firm. I had a wonderful time. He nodded, and for the first time in weeks, there was no judgment in his eyes. It wasn't reconciliation. Not yet. But it was a crack in the wall between them. Eleanor went to bed that night feeling lighter, as if she'd reclaimed a piece of herself she hadn't known she'd lost. With 2 weeks left until the eviction deadline, the house felt like a tightrope. Michael was trying. Eleanor could see it. He'd started his job, coming home in a collared shirt, his exhaustion tempered by a quiet pride. He spoke to her more. Small talk about his day or the weather. But the eviction notice still loomed, a silent reminder of the line she'd drawn. Eleanor, meanwhile, leaned into her life with renewed vigor. She and George planned their coastal trip, booking a quaint bed and breakfast in a town known for its lighthouse and quiet beaches. She bought a new hat for the trip, a wide-brimmed straw one that made her feel daring. At the book club, she shared stories of her dates with George, her voice bright with a joy she hadn't felt in years. The women cheered her on, their laughter a chorus of support. But at home, the tension with Michael lingered. One evening, as she cooked dinner roast chicken, his favoritee sat at the table, scrolling his phone. The eviction notice was gone from the counter. She'd tucked it away, hoping they could move past it. But she hadn't rescinded it. And he knew it. "Mom," he said suddenly, setting his phone down. "Can we talk about the notice?" Her hands stilled on the cutting board. She turned, meeting his eyes. "Of course." He took a deep breath, his fingers tapping nervously. "I get why you did it. I was a jerk. I shouldn't have said what I did about you and George. It's just hard. You know, seeing you move on. But I was wrong to make you feel bad about it." Eleanor's heart swelled, but she kept her expression steady. "Thank you, Michael. That means a lot. But it's not just about what you said. It's about respect. I need to know you see me as more than just your mother." He nodded, his eyes downcast. "I'm trying. I've been a mess. Mom. The divorce. The business failing, I took it out on you. I'm sorry." The apology was raw, unguarded, and it hit her like a wave. She crossed the kitchen and hugged him. The first real embrace they'd shared in weeks. "I forgive you," she whispered. "But you still need to move out. Not because I don't love you, but because we both need to live our own lives." Michael pulled back, his eyes searching hers. "I know. I've been looking at apartments. I found a place. It's small, but it's close to work. I move in next week." Eleanor blinked, surprised. "That's good. I'm proud of you." He gave a small smile, the first genuine one she'd seen in months. "Thanks. And, tell George the first said hi. He seems nice." She laughed, the sound breaking the last of the tension. "I will." The next few days were lighter. Michael packed his things, his movements purposeful. Eleanor helped, folding his clothes, wrapping dishes he'd claimed from the kitchen. They talked more, not just about logistics, but about memories as childhood. Tom's bad puns. The summer they'd built a treehouse. It wasn't perfect, but it was healing. On the eve of Michael's move, George came over for dinner. Eleanor had been nervous, but Michael was polite, even asking George about his teaching days. The conversation flowed, tentative but warm. And when George left, Michael turned to her. "He's okay, Mom. I get why you like him." Eleanor smiled, her heart full. "Thank you, Michael." The next day, she helped him load boxes into his car. As he drove away, waving from the window, she felt a mix of pride and loss. Her house was hers again, but it was quieter now. She stood in the driveway, the weight of her decision settling over her. She'd done the right thing not just for herself, but for Michael. Sometimes, love meant letting go. That evening, she called George, her voice bright. "I'm ready for that trip," she said. "Let's make it unforgettable." The coastal trip was everything Eleanor had hoped for. The bed and breakfast was charming, with creaky floors and a porch overlooking the ocean. She and George walked the beach at sunrise, her straw hat shielding her from the sun, his hand steady in hers. They talked about books, history, and the small dreams they still carried. For the first time in years, Eleanor felt fully alive, not just a mother or a widow, but a woman with a future. Back home, she settled into her new rhythm. The house felt different without Michael, but not empty. She filled it with her own life painting classes, book club meetings, dinners with George. She even started volunteering at the library with Margaret, shelving books and chatting with patrons. Her days were full, her heart fuller. Michael called regularly, updating her on his job, his apartment, even a tentative new romance. He'd grown. She could tell not just in his circumstances, but in his understanding. One Sunday, he came over for dinner, bringing a bottle of wine and a sheepish grin. "I owe you, Mom," he said, raising his glass. "You pushed me to get my act together." She smiled, clinking her glass against his. "You did the work, Michael. I just gave you a nudge." As they ate, he asked about George, about her plans. There was no judgment in his voice, only curiosity. Eleanor told him about the trip, about the lighthouse they'd climbed, the way the ocean had stretched endless before them. Michael listened, his eyes softening. "I'm glad you're happy," he said quietly. "You deserve it." Those words stayed with her long after he left. They were a gift, a bridge rebuilt between them. She thought of Tom, of the life they'd shared, and felt a quiet peace. She wasn't betraying him by living. She was honoring him by embracing the years she had left. One afternoon, as she tended her garden, George arrived with a surprise small wooden bench he'd built for her backyard. Somewhere to sit and watch the sunset, he said, his eyes crinkling. They set it up together, laughing as they struggled with the screws. When it was done, they sat, the air warm with the scent of roses. Eleanor leaned against him, her heart steady. She thought of Michael's words, of the eviction notice, of the courage it had taken to stand up for herself. It hadn't been about punishment. It had been about claiming her right to exist, to love, to be seen. As the sun dipped low, painting the sky in shades of gold and pink, George took her hand. "What's next, Eleanor?" he asked. She smiled, her gaze on the horizon. "Everything." The months that followed were a tapestry of small joys. Eleanor and George traveled Moretto museums, small towns, even a jazz festival where she danced until her feet ached. Michael visited often, their bond stronger for the space they'd given each other. He'd found his footing, and so had she. One evening, as she sat on her new bench, a letter arrived from Michael. Inside was a photo of him at his new office, smiling, and a note, "Thanks for believing in me, Mom. I'm proud of you too." Eleanor held the note, tears in her eyes. She'd taught her son a lesson, but she'd learned one too, that love, at any age, was worth fighting for. She'd reclaimed her life, not just from Michael's judgment, but from the world's expectations, from the quiet voice that had once told her she was too old to dream. As the stars emerged, she felt Tom's presence, not as a shadow, but as a warmth, cheering her on. She was 70, and she was just beginning.